大家好，欢迎收看今天的文化相对论。一开始呢，我想先跟大家分享一个故事哈。在中国四川凉山有一座悬崖村，海拔呢1400多米，与地面的垂直距离大概是800米。可以想象，在悬崖村呢，办每一件事儿都挺难的啊，包括孩子上学。所以那个时候呢，村民进出村子都需要攀爬218级的藤梯。在各方面的努力下，情况不断改善。2017年，藤梯变成了钢梯。2020年呢，全部的村民都搬进了现成的新家。悬崖村的问题似乎解决了，但是在今天的世界上，仍然还有将近7亿人生活在极端贫困线之下。为什么千百年来人类的财富不断的积累和增加，但是贫困依然大面积的存在呢？今天我们也来聊一聊贫困的本质究竟是什么。要想走出贫困的陷阱，我们的思维方式或者说我们的文化需要怎样的改变？今天先介绍一下我们在现场的2位嘉宾啊。第一位呢是温铁军教授，他是暨南大学乡村振兴研究院首席研究员。坐在我身边的姚洋教授是北京大学国家发展研究院院长。Also, we'd like to welcome our 2 online guests joining us virtually. First of all, Professor Abhijit Banerjee, Nobel Laureate of Economics. Professor Dean Collin, Professor of Economics and Finance at Northwestern University. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you for having us.
世界银行在2015年的时候重新调整了绝对贫困的定义从过去的每天1.25美元呢上升到了1.9美元。当然，各国也会根据自己的情况来设定贫困线的标准。每天不到2美元的花销能够买什么呢？这是一种什么样的生活方式呢？我们首先通过一个短片来看看各地的民众是如何理解绝对贫困这个概念的。
So I think, some rice, some things like that, maybe some help with shelter.
我觉得应该可以买点零食吃。我觉得要是像我的话，吃一天这么点的话，我觉得不够。
每天12.6元，对于一个中国人来说，如果生活在乡村的话，还是能过成一个一般的生活。这个它算不上贫困，我觉得。
I just bought a Red Bull for £2.99. Makes me feel a bit guilty.
Yeah, it would definitely be very difficult to pay rent for food for your whole children, your whole family.
You could go to a dollar store and get all different things. Here, you could probably get a candy bar.
Some people are poor because of their mentality, because rich or poor is just a state of mind.
I think what caused this poverty would probably be the inequality from the community.
I guess it's all about luck and the type of situation you get put in and the opportunities you get in life.
其实就是产能过剩之后的资产分配不均嘛。
特别是在农村，懒惰的人就更贫穷。
就作为当事人，就是贫困者个人也有自身的问题了，好比说他自己可能不努力等等，或者生病等等。好比说像我这样，刚刚退休，并且也是刚好生了病，就是有脑中风吧。如果说是有病在身，你可能就是很难创造一些社会价值了。
Well, gentlemen, you have heard all these interviews randomly done in the streets from different cities. So let's talk about the essence of poverty first. Professor Banerjee, can we start from you?
I think I'm on record saying that there is no essence of poverty. The poverty is many diseases, just like cancer. It's really many different conditions, and some people have education poverty, some people have location poverty, some people just don't have enough money, and all of those disadvantage us in the particular game that life provides.
Professor Collin, what's your definition?
So I think of the essence of poverty as lack of freedom. To say poverty is a state of mind, and that can be misconstrued.
Well, thank you. 我想问一下两位我们现场的嘉宾，你们对于贫困的理解？
当你们展现了这些必须要爬藤梯来上下的这些孩子们的时候，大家应该知道，使他们贫困的主要原因是交通，或者呢叫做资源性贫困。另外一个，我们把它叫做空间平移集中贫困。我们也看到很多发展中国家都有这种大城市贫民窟。那这些贫民窟集中的贫困，就是一种制度性贫困。
杨洋教授，
首先是一个经济发展的问题，在现代的社会里头，最重要的还是一个国家要开始工业化了，大规模的工业化了，你才能有可能的让大家脱离
规模性的脱贫。
对，如果我们要谈到说贫困的根本性的原因，恐怕还是一个国家技术发展的这个层次问题。
其实我很想问一下几位嘉宾哈，就是你们在自己的研究和调查当中，有没有亲身的和那些生活在极端贫困线之下的人在一起生活过？你们感受到的他们的生活是什么样的 ？Professor Banerjee.
Yeah, sure. This particular woman, she wanted to buy some little trinkets, some jewelry in the city, cheap jewelry, and sell it in the village. So the first time, she didn't know how to go to the city. So somebody actually helped her find out where the market is. And she was married at 13. She never had an education. Her husband abandoned her at 17. And then she had 2 children by then. And so, if somebody didn't step in and help her, it was not that she could do anything. There was just, she didn't have even the most basic information.
Professor Collin.
In Ghana, we've done a lot of work on trying to understand what holds back farmers from investing in their farm. Is it a question of resources and money? Is it a question of risk? The first answer we almost always would get is lack of money. And that's true. You do need money to buy fertilizer and put it in. We would also be told if there's a lot of rainfall such that there's a flood or a drought, then their farm can get ruined. And so then the question we work on as researchers is how do we figure out which of these issues is really a bigger driver and a more important lever to try to address.
Well, thank you. 两位跟那些生活在绝对贫困当中的人有一些什么样的接触？那种生活是什么样的？是我们今天坐在这里能够想象得到的吗？文教授。
我其实自己在60年代就曾经是贫困农民的一个。我们当年日均收入只有5毛多钱，那我觉得当时的状态和这个姚洋教授刚才说的，国家发展在那个阶段，有关。
5毛钱意味着您能吃饱饭吗？
是这样哈，因为在原来的那个集体经济时代呢，大体上呢，像我这种17岁就是壮劳力了。那我基本上能够满足我的基本生存吧，但是不够吃饱，那怎么办呢？就得收了工以后呢，去帮助那些有地的人，帮他们去做零活，这样呢就等于晚上可以在他家吃顿饭，这就
蹭一顿是吧？
就基本上吃饱了。那这个条件是什么呢？因为人口多的家呢，得到的自留地多。他就需要有人帮工，所以人口多的家庭呢，尽管分少，但他的自留地产出能够支撑他的家庭生存。
我们江西那会儿地少，就不存在你说的还帮别人打工，不可能的。如果你们家有4个孩子，那麻烦了，基本上是吃不饱了。那一定要向生产队去借粮食，他打白条去借粮食。那么那一家的孩子呢，你就看到了，他没裤子穿。一年到头他就穿那么1条裤子1件衣服，到冬天顶多加一个棉袄，基本上是衣不蔽体吧。这我是看到的
亲身的经历了哈。Sure, and let's just use the UN Millennial Development Goal, for example. The eradication of poverty is the top priority of our Sustainable Development Goal for the whole world. And actually that goal says that we hope to eradicate poverty by 2030, which is only 8 years away. And then we have this impact of coronavirus and all these conflicts and the chaos around the world, do you think that goal is achievable at all?
At all, meaning ever? Sure, I'm still an optimist, but I would say the coronavirus did a job on us. And even before that, the world economy was a bit slowing. My guess was we were going to miss that even without coronavirus, and we're surely going to miss that goal. It's good to have aspirations. It's good to say, let's aim high, because I think aiming high makes us ambitious and makes us try more.
You mean when you were part of the team to design the goal, you were almost sure that it was not achievable?
I don't think it was within the range, but I do think that it set a good target both for the poor countries and for the rich countries, because it was a collective obligation of the world.
Mm-hmm. Professor Collin.
Think about the following way. If you just said we want to reduce poverty by a certain percent, we might reach that, and that might actually then deter motivation to further work on the problem. So there's a lot to be said for having a stretch goal.
这个听上去有点像咱们中国人那句老话，叫明知不可为而为之啊。虽然这个目标很难达到，但是如果没有这目标，就更达不到了。实际上呢，我们也注意到联合国秘书长古特雷斯先生曾经评价说，中国为全球减贫做出了最大贡献啊。他没有用之一啊，他是说最大贡献。那么中国到底做对了什么？对于这些年的全世界的脱贫的这个事业，中国大概的贡献率达到70%哈。温教授，您怎么来看？
首先呢，是所有的农民都有了一份资源性资产，就是土地、山场等等这些资源。那接着呢，又是因为在70、80年代，中国已经初步完成了早期的工业结构建设，这时候呢，工业开始向乡村辐射，所以在80年代曾经有过中国大规模减贫的经验，但是90年代开始，我们又有了一个相对比较规模化返贫的教训。这个苏联东欧解体，中国也同样受到美国和西方的制裁。这个时候呢是都穷，直到进入新世纪，中国采取了一种所谓逆周期调节的国家战略，才重新进入了新的建设阶段。我其实想说一个很重要的因素，贫困农村弱势群体是不可能有自主完成资本积累的能力。这个责任谁的？政府的。资本投资是政府的，资本投下去的风险是政府的。农民弱势群体他们可以零资本用劳动来加入，占有资本收益最大化的收入，这样就导致我们在当代的就是进入21世纪以后的减贫变成了一个完全不同以往的模式了。
新世纪的这个减贫啊，我要补充一下，我觉得呢最重要的还是对外开放，加入世贸组织。那么这头这个国家政府的刚才铁军讲的这些投资到底起到多大作用？我觉得这个作用还是有限的。我自己的经历就是97年回国，我那时候中国只有一条高速公路，其实这个基建投资并不多，更多的就业还是在这个沿海地区开放型的这种产业里头，在这些工厂里头，这个是我们这个我觉得新世纪脱贫最重要的因素。
Professor Kennedy, according to your research, how do you explain the success of China's fight against poverty? And do you think those experiences or lessons could be emulated and learned by other parts of the world? And how so?
It's in our book we actually have China plays a very important role, and the role it plays is to say that it's hard to imagine easily emulating China. That China is unique in so many ways. It's a big country, a very unique history. That it came out of a long history of communism, which created certain structures within society. It's not that you could just take China's experience and kind of take it kind of wholesale and place it in Afghanistan. it made us open to thinking more generally about the problem of development.
Then, Professor Collins, if you can learn just 1 or 2 points from China's experiences, what would they be?
Human capital investment is one thing I would add that we have seen, decades ago, a large investment in China in human capital investment, and we do see evidence from this around the world as an absolutely critical investment. And this has led to a lot of success. We have to remember that when we think about eradicating poverty, we don't really care about GDP. We care about people.
中国人的智慧是什么 ？Go down to the ground, pragmatic。你得做出来一点东西，从这开始，别先谈这个那个，对吧？先做点东西出来。我觉得中国这一点恐怕呢，所有的国家都应该学，而且应该学到。对啊，我知道印度有那么强的这个劳动保护措施，对不对呢？当然对，但是你落到这个地面上，到底是好还是坏呢？对不对？你要那么高的劳动保护，超过100人的工厂，你就必须做这做那，就大家都不做了。对吧？中国呢就好得很，是我们是穷人，我们从穷开始，我们也先别管什么 labor standards， 先做出来，让老百姓都有一个工作所做，对吧？他慢慢才能脱贫，这是中国人的智慧。
其实我在这里还想引出一个文化的问题，从各位的角度来看。为什么世界上东亚地区在解决绝对贫困的这个问题上相对会做得更好一些？这个和比如说我们的历史和儒家文化有什么内在的联系吗？
应该说东亚是儒家文化圈。儒家文化圈一个很重要的思想，就是孔夫子在2500年前就已经提出的早期的大同说，也就是大道之行，天下为公。他当时讲的就是鳏寡孤独、贫困人口都应该是得到救助的。那这个天下为公，我们可以理解为中国2000多年前早期的原始共产主义思想。所以中国今天讲
welfare，
当然他就
共同的福利吧。
那时候就在讲共同富裕，那时候就在讲大家是共生的，因此应该共享。所以他这个思想体系覆盖的整个东亚，你可以去看一下。这个世界上如果说有连片的脱贫，那就是东亚，中国、日本、韩国、中国、台湾、越南，你几乎找不到绝对贫困了。所以它一定有值得我们关注的这种文化之根。那这个文化之根呢，要我说呢，其实就是它受儒家文化影响所强调的资源是共享的。所以第一个要点呢是共生，就是人和资源是共生的。所以我们提出人与资源和谐共生的命运共同体，这是当代的对东亚儒家文化的一个新的表述，它就包括了共生、共享、共治这个3共的基本原则。
Professor Banerjee, I know that India also has a very long and rich cultural heritage. What are some of the wisdoms from its culture that can inspire us in the efforts to eradicate poverty?
Yeah, I would say if I had to pick something from the Indian tradition, sense of harmony with nature. I think the one deep sort of Indian is that everything has a place and everything needs to be in harmony.
And Gandhi also made a very good comments on the maintaining the livelihood of the villagers, their existence in harmony with the nature, mutual help and assistance among the communities, and those are very good points to make in today's efforts to fight poverty. Just to comment on that. 杨洋教授也可以来分析一下，从我们中国的这个古代的文化的这种传承啊，我们来看在扶贫济困的这个方面，我们的这种制度安排是怎样的哈？比如说乡村起到一个什么样的作用，政府起到一个什么样的作用，这样的一种联动，是不是在今天依然有着某种延续性啊？
在古代的时候，他们非常强调这种血缘关系、地缘关系。所以我们很多的在民间的这种扶贫啊，是基于这种血缘关系、宗族关系。对，比如说范仲淹，他们范家的这个扶贫的，它延续了800年，800年，
就是我们从宋朝其实就有那种叫义仓吧，一个村子或者一个宗族设立了一个粮仓，哎，是有了寡妇啊，有了孤儿啊，实际上用这个粮食来救济他们。
对，它还有义田，有学田，就每个大的宗族呢，他们有一些田呢，他拿来就是要赈济，他们这个族里头的这个穷人，这是我们这个文化的一部分。当然，在现代社会呢，这种血缘地缘关系都松散了。但是如果看一下我们国家这个在基层的这些治理呢，我们还是能看到很多的这样的一个痕迹。比如说我们强调这种社区为基础的这种扶贫的措施。我觉得这个也是别的国家也能够呢，我觉得是借鉴的一些经验。
宋代开始嘛，有吕氏相约嘛，来约束乡村社区的道德规范，让大家有共同的行动、共同的归属，然后一起来抵御这个气候变化，形成的是亚洲社会中的，特别是东亚，它开始形成了一种以社区为本位的群体文化，这就是它延续下来的一个重要的原因。
Well, as we can see, all these scholars, they have different approaches of research to explain the causes or the roots of poverty, and also shed light with different experiences and practices around the world. Professor Banerjee, what's your way or what's the methodology of research from your part to explain the roots of poverty and then to suggest solutions to tackle this problem?
So I think what the work we do is, in a sense, studying individual solutions. How do you, if children are in school but they're not learning, how do you help them to learn? And in a sense, that's not inconsistent with, a lot of the way the Chinese experience happened. There were experiments, there were changes, there were trials, there were failures, there were successes. You build on that, but we do it in a very methodical way. We do the experiments quite carefully with randomized experiments.
Professor Cullen, I know that you try to explain the roots of poverty and the way to tackle it through behavioral economics. You have suggested some very tangible moves to make bigger changes. And how do you see they work?
What you're referring to is actually exactly this work that I started working on with Professor Banerjee. Some of that was information about how to start an income generating activity. Maybe it was beekeeping in Ethiopia. In West Bengal, it was raising livestock. In Peru, it had to do with either petty trade or also raising guinea pig. And one of the most important things we think, but this is part of what we're trying to learn more about, was an initial asset transfer, a 200th of some productive asset like livestock to help kickstart this process for these households. And so this package together has proven not just to work in the short run, but also generate sustained impact in the long run.
So we know the efforts to tackle the issue of poverty is very complex. It has many facets that we should pay attention to. Now, here's a short video about our interviews with people in the streets to ask them about different policies and how they see them and which works and which doesn't.
I think about council housing, I know it's a great policy to have and to implement, but it's super difficult to get it and there's a long waiting list. Yeah. And even when people get it, they're put into unsafe conditions, like the flats aren't really livable.
We have such a problem with homeless people here. It's such a problem getting them to accept shelter. A lot of them don't want to accept shelter because they have to go in at a certain time at night and they have to leave at a certain time in the morning.
对口帮扶政策，然后通过东部沿海一些比较富裕城市，然后来定点支援一些西部一些贫困地区。
然后经济复兴，我觉得效果是比以前好吧？不是说我看新闻上说是我们国家几年前好像就几千个贫困县脱贫了嘛已经，所以我觉得这个还是挺好的。
去年嘛，我们浙江省那边也是作为一个共同富裕的试点区，然后我也很希望就是这样的政策以后可以在试验和落实之后，可以尽快去推广。
农村现在有低保啊， 有60岁以后的养老保金呐，这都是对这个贫困人群的太大的照顾，这是国家政策的优越性。
可能就是通过去发放生活的一些基本保障金和生活必需品。
从这个发展生产的角度来说，就是要发展更多的企业，让更多的企业茁壮的成长，让市场去解决、去承担这个消除贫困的这样一个角色。
要是像那种有能力的人，一个月捐5块钱捐到那些贫穷的家庭，的话，应该是可以解决。
因为我是工科嘛，在我看来，可能就是科技和教育是两个最为关键的一个东西。
I definitely agree that it all starts in education because there's so much you can do, and by reaching them children from such a young age.
One of my friends in high school got in a major car wreck and is still paying off the loans from that car wreck. So and that really affected him from being able to go to university and things like that. And so I'm really a big proponent of helping people through expanding our healthcare in the U.S. I think that's really important.
你看到其实大家都从各个方面谈到扶贫的一些这个政策哈。Professor Banerjee, so people argue about the effectiveness of different policies. Is it better to give cash? Is it better to give out food or it's coupons? Do we give out a mosquito net for free or we give people money to buy mosquito nets? Do we give people a fish or teach them how to fish or to give them a fish market?
It's not easy. What I think we've learned is that it's easy to say that we teach people to fish. It's very hard to teach them to fish. There's lots of evidence from training programs which say that if you just train people in skills and then you at least short-term trainings, they just don't seem to have very much impact. So I think it's useful to rely on people's own way of figuring out their life, and what they need often is just some start, some investment that they can make. As you need to give them something, give them hope, give them a way of getting started, and then maybe they will figure out a way to fish.
Share with us some of your findings of the way that the poor people, how they make choices and decisions in their life.
So in our book, we give the example of a very poor man who says he's starving in Morocco, and we're surprised by the fact that after he says that he doesn't have enough food, we go and we find a TV. And I think a lot of people's reaction to the story was, how could he not be prioritizing eating over the TV? How did he manage to get a TV? And I think our sense was that that's actually a misreading. His life is extraordinarily drab. He really doesn't have much to do. Watching football with his friends once in a while on TV is the high point of his life. In some ways, we look at life from our point of view and not from their point of view. Maybe that's the biggest lesson.
That's the biggest lesson. Yes, that point is very well taken. So when we design certain policies, it's not just what we think they may need, but rather what they actually need. So Mr. Collin, what kind of lessons did you learn?
I think one lesson that I try very hard to adhere to, or one principle, is to be dogmatic about only one thing, and that is to not be dogmatic. Take the example you gave on bed nets, but it is the case that we have seen very clear evidence that if you give out very small transfers of cash, unconstrained on what people can do with it, the first thing bought is not a bed net. And it's also actually much more expensive to set up a whole structure of getting people to pay for bed nets than it is to give it out for free. You end up getting much higher usage of those bed nets. And so, a key challenge that I think we face in this space is that we want to set up policies that help people make the choices that they themselves would want to make if they had full information and were able to reflect and plan.
温教授，
这件事情，我想我们跟2位国外的朋友呢，似乎不在同一个空间讨论问题。 大家都知道，中国现在农户的通电率是99%以上。我们是把水电、路、气、宽带全部都修到农村了，并且河道整治、山田各方面的这个基本建设都已经到位了，形成了巨额的设施性资产。我们现在的做法是把资产直接交到村里，我们叫投改股，把投资改成股份，然后由村来代政府持资产，就持有资产，村再把这个资产做股量化到户，这可以相当于西方要求的那个私有化，那农民就能够占有股权，就叫做分享长期的财产性收入，以此来防止大家说的那种你到底是给蚊帐还是给他是个什么面包，还是给他个什么，这个东西就不存在了，因为资产已经到了他们人人有份的这个，
就是让贫穷的人实际上是有了资产性的收入了。
不错，所以财产性收入呢，是防止这个规模性发生返贫的一个重要的条件，这是其一。其二，那当他们发展起来之后呢，我们再提高它的合作社的组织化程度，而且是多种功能的合作社，比如金融，我们是村办合作社可以搞金融的，对吧？那可以搞购销的。所以中国讲的这个脱贫攻坚要跟乡村振兴有效衔接，它是有具体操作办法的。所以在这些事情上，我倒觉得恐怕需要让海外更多的知道一点，因为大家不懂我们怎么才能保证这个已经完成脱贫的人不再返贫。
其实好多这种制度性的安排啊，在世界上各地呢也有一些不同的实践，但是换了地方以后，它不一定效果就这么的显现。比如说啊，曾经获得诺贝尔和平奖的尤努斯先生哈，他创办了那 Grameen Bank 啊，穷人的银行，通过小额信贷的方式呢，来帮助孟加拉的很多穷人脱贫了。那后来全球呢也有100多个国家、200多个试点啊，想要复制这样的一个政策，但是在一些地方其实并不是非常成功。
他来中国的时候，我跟他谈过1个小时。
您跟他也交流过，
对，交流过
啊。您觉得这个适合在中国吗？
其实这里边有个很重要的规律，就是他认为呢，小额信贷的那个收息应该是高的。那也认为呢，农民是能够支付得了这些所谓高利息的借贷的，这就和我们现在的实际情况之间的相去甚远。比如在印度出现借了这个小额信贷的农民不得不因为还不上嘛，甚至发生自杀等等这些现象。所以不是它的设计不好，而是在落地的时候呢，有些地方实际上缺这个落地条件。它在孟加拉落地的条件是什么？是提高组织化程度，帮助借贷的农户，尤其是妇女，形成合作社，大家互帮完成它这个相对比较高利息的回款，它才能维持得下去。但在相当多的地方没组织，没人去做这事儿，大家就在放高利贷，所以就造成失败。
Professor Banerjee, do you agree with Mr. Wen's explanation why microcredit works and doesn't work in different parts of the world?
So a lot of people do benefit from microcredit. They just don't get richer. So there is a set of people who were entrepreneurial, who needed the credit, but not all of us are entrepreneurs. I think that's where I disagree with Professor Yunus. So he thinks everybody is a potential entrepreneur. Me, I'm not a potential entrepreneur. I don't want to start a business. I want to be a professor. I have a good life. I want to live that life. And so I agree with the professor that, for most farmers, the returns won't cover the interest rate.
Yeah. 其实我一直有一个问题，中国在过去的30年发生了剧烈的城市化的这样的一个改变。为什么在中国没有出现像一些发展中国家那样的很大的贫民窟的这种现象？这个现象是怎么被避免的呢？
我觉得有2方面原因啊。一方面恐怕呢是文化方面。就是中国人他一直有这种安土重迁的这样的一个习惯，他会在家里头呢盖一栋房子，然后呢把老婆孩子留在那里，他自己呢到城里头来打工。所以呢这样呢，他在城里头呢，他不会说永远的待下来，成为这样的一个贫民窟的现象。另外一个呢，我还想说呢，就是这个土地平均分配啊，它是起作用的。那就每个人都有土地，我在村里头还有一块地。所以呢， 我要惦记那块地，我不会愿意呢到城里来，我做一个 nobody， 我在这个村里头，我是somebody，对吧？是某个人的叔叔，某个人的舅舅，我要受到尊重。我想这两方面
这种对于故土的这样的一份这个联系哈，其实始终没有被阻断。
对。
According to Stolper-Samuelson theorem, every country should benefit from free trade. But actually, in reality, not everyone benefit from it evenly. In his book, A Hillbilly Elegy, J.D. Vance describes the suffering of middle-class Americans in the Rust Belt region, whose economic situation is aggravated by globalization. What are your comments?
But what happens in, small town in North Carolina is that the industry shuts down there, and it maybe some other industry, a restaurant opens in New York City. But those things are not the same. I mean, the person from North Carolina doesn't move to New York City immediately. What happens is he keeps hoping the job will come. And I think that's the very clear evidence from the work on globalization, which in some sense I think is a major failure of policy. We just let the losers lose. And then of course they do lose. And I think this has been the history of so many countries which have then become, anti-trade.
Mm-hmm. Professor Collin, do you also pay the academic attention to such issues as the impact of globalization on poverty?
And it goes back to this idea of freedom. Why doesn't the household in North Carolina move, or in rural, in a lower income country? Why aren't they able to move? And it is about freedom. It's not necessarily about legal freedom. It's not like legally someone maybe they have the right to move, but they don't have the necessary education, the health, the finances to make those movements. The social networks, the comfort that when they move, there's going to be a community for them to greet them. As for all of the negative talk we hear about immigration, the striking thing is how few people actually immigrate and create a livelihood for yourself and create a sense of community.
我也想问两位一个问题啊，因为中国已经宣布完成了脱贫的这个大业哈，但是同时也有一些争议和担忧，对于更加富裕起来的这些人会加大他们的这种收入的再分配啊，来分配给穷人。不知道两位怎么看待中国现在在做的共同富裕的这个道路？将是一种什么样的路径呢？
我觉得共同富裕在去年提出来，实际上呢是恰逢其时。因为呢，我们已经消除了绝对的贫困，那下一步呢，我们要提升所有人的富裕程度，对吧？我们在过去这个40多年里头，这个发展呢，主要还是市场在起作用。铁军可能不同意我这个说法，我觉得还是主要是市场在起作用，不是政府在起作用。但市场起作用呢，它必定呢会造成这个分化，对吧？有些人呢先富裕起来，怎么去搞这个共同富裕呢？是说我们把富人的钱多收点税，然后呢就直接发给穷人呢？还是我们转变一个思路，我们说提高穷人的收入能力，就授人以渔，教他们去这个打鱼。既然这是个100年大计，我觉得我们到时候可以做这件事了。我其实在这一点上我跟铁军也有不同，我觉得铁军过分的强调了资产的作用，在现代社会资产的作用是比较小的，最重要的还是人，你的人的人力资本，对吧？你能做什么，这个才是更加重要的。
温教授同意吗？
这当然应该是一个分析的内容吧。因为大家往往是停留在上一个阶段，也就是说以工业化和城市化作为现代化的主要支柱，按照这个方向发展，人们所形成的那个财富观念呀等等。很少有人关注，其实中国在新世纪遭遇到全球化挑战以来，已经在做重大的发展战略的方向调整。我们把过去的平面资源开发形成的财富，转变成空间生态资源的立体开发，以这个财富呢来形成新的分配，
也就是说，不仅仅是大家决定怎么分这个蛋糕，而且还是要把这个蛋糕做大的。
是一个新的阶段正在到来。我说呢，其实应该更多的关注新阶段的相对应的，它的新的制度应该怎样安排。比如说浙江省现在是全国的共同富裕示范省，浙江省的财产关系就是相对而言照顾到广大山区农民的财产性收入的那个需求的，所以它的共同富裕呢，应该说对全国有一定的示范意义。
其实我们注意到，它不仅仅是经济上的脱贫，我的收入超过2美元了，还是怎样，它也有一种精神的需求需要得到满足。
我们最近这几年一直在搞一个活动，叫做爱故乡。相当多的都是在城市中的这些诗人啊、文学家呀、艺术家呀、音乐家呀，他们到农村去帮助农民开展各种文化活动。最近还有一个村歌活动，
就每个村要有一首歌，是吧？
对，大家来参与，大家来讨论哪些是我们这个村的历史，哪些是我们最值得传承的那些优点。我们说得通过有组织的形成文化自觉，那个体的自尊才能在组织的活动之中得到保护，得到发扬光大。
Now let's look at this video that we also interview people from different parts of the world, though they are giving comments on where we are heading for, whether they have confidence that we will win the fight against poverty.
It's definitely possible. Like I said, we need opinions from people all over the world, in all different backgrounds.
I'm afraid not. Even if it's up to people, it's sometimes natural disasters, it's fires, it's tsunamis, it's things happen, and from one day you might actually have everything and the next you don't have.
Like everyone shares out their money equally. If you pay more, you share it out to the people in poverty.
I think under capitalism it's a bit hard to imagine that. I hope that it's possible, but I think it's very difficult to imagine.
I talked to a lot of people and I asked them, does the American dream still exist? And they all say no. It's always rich people who, with money, make money.
Like we live in a pyramid kind of world whereby most of the population are dominated by poor people. And if you would say completely eliminated is the wrong thing, but if we could alleviate their poverty, it's possible.
因为热力学都说嘛，熵增原理就不可能会达到这种绝对平衡的，所以说我觉得这种绝对性的没有穷人的社会是不存在的。
按照我们现在的说法，就是，大家的目标是共同富裕嘛，所以他不可能会允许太多的人贫困。
我其实觉得这样的理想，在我国古代的，就是春秋战国百家争鸣的时候的思想家心中就已经有了，然后一直传承至今，又被我们去继承。然后我们也有这样的行动力和信心吧，抱有这样的一个希望和一个梦想，就是说这样的理想的社会是可以实现的。
我们不是有没有能力要做到，而是必将做到，这就是我们国家的发展的一个目标。
Well, I remember in the book Capital in the 21st Century by Thomas Piketty, he mentioned that the most reliable factors for development and prosperity are the raise of productivity and education, basically the investment into human capital. So I would like to ask each of you to give us 3 keywords as the major factors to tackle poverty. 先从温教授开始吧。
第一个关键词应该是组织。
组织。
对，因为单个的弱势群体是很难改变自己的生存状态的。第二个关键词应该是生态。我们强调的是生态化转型本身是化解以往工业化、城市化发展方式所造成的贫富两极分化。第三个就是文化上的互相尊重，各美其美，才能美美与共，我们才能实现人与自然和谐相处的命运共同体。
姚教授。
其实我是非常同意这个 Piketty 的这个观点，就是技术进步，还有人力资本的提高，是最重要的。如果要再加一个呢，我想呢，再加一个就是制度。我们在制度方面呢，做一些这个改进，我觉得呢，我们可以更多的消除贫困。
Professor Banerjee.
I'll go a different direction. I think we start with hope. We really need to invest in hope. Number 2 is be brave, experiment, try things. And the last one is dignity. Respect individuals' views, listen to them, think of them as people, not as units.
Professor Collin.
Sure. My 3 words are freedom, inclusiveness, and evidence.
We keep on our efforts. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for participating in this program. 其实从人类历史的长河来看呢，直到18世纪中期啊，整个世界按照现在的标准是普遍非常贫困的啊。当时呢，人类的预期寿命不到40岁。近200年以来，人口和人均收入都出现了前所未有的高速增长，也被称为是现代经济的增长时期。但是我记得这个富兰克林·罗斯福说过一句话哈，可能会给我们带来一些启发。他说：“我们对于进步的检验，不在于我们是否为那些拥有很多的人增加了更多，而在于我们是否为那些缺乏的人提供足够的东西。消除绝对贫困当然是一个艰巨的任务，但是它并不是不可能实现的，因为应对危机和困境的勇气和决心，一直是人类最好的武器。”感谢你收看这一期的文化相对论，我们下期见。文化相对论当中的相对一词有2重含义，一是每个民族每个国家有自己的文化根性，二是我们的交流互鉴能够彼此启发并且带来合作。欢迎各位。
推动这件事儿，就是为了我们这个地球的未来。
The poverty is many diseases, just like cancer.
You change one thing, it has so many unforeseen consequences.
Globalization has come, so here is a challenge.
中国在1000年以前就做到了这一点。It is a totally different culture.
我们应该遵循自然的发展。
Nothing against the grain.
希望能看到各个国家年轻人能够在一起去解决我们人类面临的问题。